Listen.
There is absolutely no evidence, and every economist will tell you this, that there is any job loss related to the Affordable Care Act. Part-time positions are actually down since 2010, not up. Their number of full-time workers continues to increase.
Well, South Dakota Senator John Thune serves on the Finance and Commerce Committees. He is chair of the Senate Republican Conference. He is here with me now, and he was also shaking his head during that
right.
clip from the Health and Human Services Secretary. You disagree with her assessment?
I do, John. I don't know what parallel universe that she or members of the president's administration are living in, but clearly there's an Obamacare bubble around Washington, D.C. If you get out in the real world, you talk to people out there who are meeting payrolls, middle-class families trying to deal with higher premiums and higher deductibles and canceled coverages. This is having a real economic impact. And they don't want to acknowledge it. I understand why. It's got real, not only economic consequences, but political consequences for them.
But didn't that Congressional Budget Office report just out say that Obamacare is going to result in 2.5 million people, in the net loss of 2.5 million jobs over the next 10 years?
Well, it did. And what it said was not only that, but it was going to reduce wages by 1%. And if the Senate Budget Committee looked at what that means, it's $1 trillion in reduced wages to the American people. So it's going to hurt take-home pay. Obviously, you're going to have higher out-of-pocket costs with deductibles and premiums, and fewer doctors and hospitals. I mean, that's the real-world impact of this. So Secretary Sebelius, I think, I don't know who she's listening to, academics or economists that are liberal-leaning, but in the real world, this is the impact that it's having. And the American people are suffering.
Is that why the president waved his magic wand and said now some businesses are not going to have to comply with some of the Obamacare requirements until 2016?
Right, and I think that the thing, to me that acknowledges, it's an admission on the president's part that this is hurting the economy, it's hurting jobs. I mean, why do you have to waive or delay now almost 30 times portions of this act? And it's pretty clear to me that it's because they're trying to save some people's jobs in the midterm elections.
There was a report, going to that point, in Politico this morning that says this: Democrats know their biggest problem in this year's midterm elections is Obamacare. So top party operatives have settled on a strategy to try blunting the GOP's advantage. Tell voters Republicans would make the problem worse, raise prescription drug prices, empowering insurance companies, and even endangering domestic violence victims. That's apparently the attack line that's coming toward your party. Are you ready to deal with that?
Well, usually when Democrats are playing a losing hand, when they're losing an argument, they resort to scare tactics, and I think this is an example of that. But you saw last June, they were saying the Democrat strategy for the 2014 election was own Obamacare. This is going to be an advantage for us in the long run. Just this last week, there was a story in Politico which said the Democrat strategy is now neutralize Obamacare. They realize that this is a problem. And I think what they're attempting to do is to change the subject. And that's what whenever they're losing an argument, that's what they try to do, and try and scare people into believing that somehow the Republicans are going to be worse. But there isn't. The American people, I think, have made their minds up on this. They know that this is bad for the economy, bad for their own personal economic circumstances, and that's why there's so much negativity about it around the country.
On the House side, as you know, there have been 40 or so attempts to repeal Obamacare, and this same Politico piece goes to that. It says an internal Democratic poll recently conducted in Montana, where there's a competitive Senate race, found that 65% of voters agree with the statement, "We've wasted too much time talking about Obamacare, and we have other problems to deal with." Despite the botched rollout of the website, despite all of the problems that this thing seems to be causing, do you think that some Americans just want to fix it and move on?
Well, I think that most Americans would like to see it fixed, but the problem is it's unfixable. I mean, you cannot, this thing is built upon a faulty foundation. It assumes that people who aren't signing up are going to sign up, younger people are going to sign up. It's got all kinds of new taxes and cuts in Medicare Advantage reductions that are coming next week. These are going to be real-world impacts on people across this country. And the reason that people are talking about it in Washington, D.C. is because people are talking about it around the country. And I think it's going to continue to be a subject of conversation. Now, it feeds into a broader discussion we need to be having about jobs in the economy, and I think we need to be talking about what we can do to get the economy growing again and expanding and creating jobs. But Obamacare is a part of the national conversation that's going to continue because it's having real-world impacts.
Senator John Thune, Republican, South Dakota. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Nice to be with you.